In this video, I will show you how I would improve 7 artworks which were submitted to the latest CG Boost Ancient Robot Challenge. So, enjoy! Hi everyone, Zach Reinhardt here for cgboost.com, and our mission at CG Boost is to help you guys to create CG art which you can be proud of and eventually make a living with what you're passionate about. And that's why I make these art critic videos, to smash your images in order to help you improve. So from 180 submissions, I picked 7 images which I think I can give some valuable feedback to help you improve. Certainly this is my opinion. I might have some good points, some of my points might be bad, so you have to decide what you take away from this video. If you want to join our current or the next CG Boost challenge for 3D artists in order to improve your skills and get the chance to win a bunch of cool prizes, check cgboost/challenge. And we also provide a bunch of free Blender resources, for example, a Blender 2.8 hotkey sheet with all the important shortcuts. If you want to download this, check cgboost/resources. All the links you also find below in the video description and in the info box. Alright guys, without further words, let's get started. Alright, this first image was created by Lino Thomas, and I have to say I really like this. I like the mood in this image, the colors he have chosen, the modeling, the materials, everything looks really good to me. But there's one main problem I think this image has, and this is readability. You can't really easily read the shape of the robot. And I think this is mainly because of these things here, the rib cage thing, if this should be the upper body. Because you can see we have those kind of shapes over here, but we have the same shapes over here at the hands. So these shapes are basically blocking that we can recognize this hand clearly. And then we have the same shapes here in the reflection of the water. And this makes reading the robot really hard, so I made a quick overpaint here. And you can see if I, for example, close the upper body here and give it a different shape, this becomes much more clear to read. You can now easily see these fingers over here. And I also changed the face a bit. As you can see here, this is a hole, and we have these 2 things which should be the eyes, I guess. But I thought it would be cool to close this area and add a kind of mouse and maybe make this a bit darker. And also I darkened up the eyes a bit, because then as human you can immediately recognize this as a face. Certainly this is personal preference here, and this might not fit the scene, but I think this helps to make this image or this robot much easier to read. And the second thing in terms of readability is reference. So we as human, we always need like real life reference or scale reference so that we can understand like the size of the robot. Because right now I only can imagine that the robot is quite big from the cliff in the background and from these trees over here. But what would help a lot, for example, is to just add a bunch of birds over here, so we can really see that this is a huge robot because we have a scale reference. And if you, for example, want to make this robot a bit smaller, then you just have to scale up the birds a bit. So if I scale them up a bit, put them over here, then the robot looks a bit smaller already. Yeah. But other than that, I think this is a really good image. So the next image was created by Emanuel Cacciola, if I pronounce your name right. If not, sorry for that. This is a quite simple image, I would say. And first of all, I would recommend to maybe add a little bit more details to the robot to make this more interesting to look at. But this is not really what I want to talk about here. The main issue I have here is that we have so much empty space over here. And in this way, we have a lot of weight to the left side of the image, but nothing over here to balance the weight basically. So what I would recommend in the first step is to move the robot a bit more to the side. Maybe let's add a bunch of details to make this more interesting. And you can see that we now have this empty space over here. And this robot, which I quite like, is it looks like he's looking to this position. So what we could do is to simply add a little character over here and then the whole image also tells a little story, because here we have just this old robot. Certainly we can also imagine like a little story, but since we don't have many details to look at, this might be a bit boring. But if we add some interesting elements to look at, this becomes much more interesting. And if we add a little character, people like to look at characters. So you can imagine like a whole story behind this, like this guy is traveling through the desert and then finds this giant destroyed robot, something like that. So yeah, and I think with this little tricks here, this image becomes much better already. Alright, the next image here was created by Keelan Maclear, if I pronounce his name right. And in general, it looks really good. I like the mood of the image with the atmosphere in the background. The lighting is also quite nice. The colors you have used I quite like. The robot is quite interesting with all these ornaments. So in general, I really like this, but there are some little issues I see. So I think the first problem is the position of the camera, because it's now kind of hovering somewhere in the air. We don't have like a camera which is standing on the ground like the people, and we don't have like a bird's eye view. Certainly in 3D space you can put your camera wherever you want, but I think it's better to place it in areas which is also doable in real life. So, and since this one here is a huge robot, I probably would put the camera on the ground, like on the eye level of the people, and then it's looking upwards, and then you can see this giant robot. The second thing is the robot itself. When you pose something, a character or a robot here in this case, you always have to take care about the center of gravity, because right now this leg here is flexed, but the whole robot is, I think, quite heavy. So it feels a bit that it would fall to the side here. So I think in this case you could avoid this by just placing the other legs a bit differently so that it balances out the mass of the whole robot here a bit. So and the third problem I have are the people. In my opinion, it looks like all the people are just placed randomly here in the scene. I mean, how did they even get up here? It's this big rock and they are just sitting there and doing nothing. And also all the other people are just standing around and doing nothing really. And they all look the same. And this is kind of boring and pointless in this scene, I think. So let's adjust this a bit. First of all, let's put the camera down and maybe add like a road or something like this. So I don't know what you wanted to do with your image. Maybe these are some war machines, but maybe these are just giant replacements of real camels to help transport stuff to other places. I don't know. So I thought these are maybe just like replacements of real camels. So I just added this giant camel to the road here, and as you can see, what I tried here to change the perspective, now it's basically the eye level of a human and we are looking up to this giant robot here, and I try to like show this a bit with the perspective that the leg here in the foreground is much bigger than the stuff here in the background. And maybe this is like in this universe, it's like a typical scene you will see with these giant robots. So we could just add a bunch of people walking around here, maybe a carriage over here, and these people carrying stuff around and into the city over here. And I think in this way, adding this robot to the scene would look like more natural. It would fit this universe better if like the people don't interact like too crazy with this robot. Or maybe this is even a thing they see the first time, so they just look up and be amazed on this giant thing. And if they are battle machines, basically you could place them over here like they are preparing for a big battle on a big field, something like this in front of this city over here. So yeah, the main issue I basically have is placing the camera so that the robot appears much bigger and maybe make the people interact more natural with the robot here. So the next image was created by Nathalia Ferrari, if I pronounce your name right. And I quite like it. I like the flowers and also the colors here and the water, and also the robot design is quite nice. It's simple, but it really fits the scene here. So the first thing I tried here is to change the aspect ratio, because although I really like the water down here and everything, it feels like we have a lot of empty space which is not really used. I think this is personal preference, but yeah, I changed this to this for now. You can see now we are just focusing more on the robot. One technical thing, I think you added like the depth of field, the blur in post, but then you have this blur over here, but you still have the sharp edges. So I would recommend to add the depth of field directly to the camera inside your 3D application, and then this will look much more natural. Or you render out the trees here in the foreground separately, and then if you blur it, then you don't have the sharp edges over here. Then I slightly increased the brightness, which you easily can do by adding levels over here and change this a bit. Before I think it was slightly too dark, and now we have the better feel of this brighter sunlight, which I quite like. Certainly the flowers are a bit overblown right now. Here we would have to change the color a bit maybe. And what I also added is the lines here, which should represent like some beveled edges, because on the original image you have some very sharp edges on the robot, and this doesn't look realistic because in real life nearly nothing has this really sharp edges. Everything has like a little beveled edge, and then also the light reflects in the edges here, and then you can read the shape of the robot also much better. Then what I also don't like that much is this foliage stuff over here, because it feels like it's just placed on one spot here and everything else has nothing, and then it looks like somebody put these plants just there a minute ago and walked away, so it doesn't feel that these really grow out of these gaps here. Here I just removed basically the plants, and then I added a bunch of new ones. You can see I added a lot of moss here and there, and I added just a few plants growing out of these gaps, which are basically also the flowers up here, and then I think it fits better into the scene in general. And if I put everything together, I slightly changed the composition a bit, or the cropping, and I also added the water a bit closer to the robot. And then if we compare it with the original, I think it looks a bit more appealing to look at, although it was a good image already. So in general, good job on that, and I hope this helps you to improve your renders the next time. So the next one was created by, sorry, I probably totally screw up your name, Pere Albacar Roda, something like this. Sorry for misspelling your name here. Anyway, first of all, awesome robot design. I think this is the most unique robot I've seen in this challenge. It really looks like an ancient thing with all these cracks here and the texture and everything and these weird shapes up here. So really good job on that. But I think the big problem with this image is also readability. So if I turn this into black and white, you can see all the values here. And what you recognize maybe is that we don't have just one area to focus on, because we have a lot of white spots. We have a white spot here, 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 and here. And besides of these white spots, we also have a lot of visual noise, basically, because we have all these lines going on here, here, and here as well. And then also here we have like all these different lines. So this is a lot of noise going on. Then down here, this character here, the main character I would say, wears a dark coat thing, which really good blends with the dark background. So it's also not that recognizable. And these two characters, this guy here is wearing black pants and the girl is wearing dark dress or something like that. And this also blends really good together into one big blob, which you can't recognize in the first seconds you basically look at this image. So you have to look at this image for a few seconds to recognize everything here. Especially the robot really good hides between all those shapes. If you want to have all those shapes, then you probably have to work with depth of field or anything, that you blur out these things a bit more, that we can focus more on the robot. But in general, I tried to make this image better to read. So first thing I did, I was darken out the area around the robot. So certainly I just added a few strokes here. You can add a bit more interesting stuff. Maybe it is a bit bent so it supports the shape of the robot. So this robot is better framed. Then I removed this light over here, because here we also have still 2 lights going on, which you certainly can do. But I think to make this robot a bit more interesting, I darkened up this light up here and added this kind of eyes. And I just don't edit like the sphere, because I think it's just too simple and we immediately recognize that you just put in a sphere there which is glowing. And if we add these like eye shapes which look a bit more interesting, I think we also add a lot of character to the robot. Certainly you also could just have one in the middle or just the 2 on the side. You have to play around with that. And what I also tried is to simply remove the 2 characters here. By that I just want to show you that you can have a much more clear and much easier to read image. Maybe you could have add the characters with a bit of different posing, maybe a different color on the clothing to separate this a bit better. And also, as you can see on this guy, I changed the code here, which you don't have to do, but I just wanted to try this out to make this guy a bit better to read, and also I added a little bit light to this side here. And now if I make this grayscale, you can read the image much better, because we mainly focus on this area here immediately when we look at this image. So again, in comparison, that's the original one. You have a lot of visual noise, and that's the edit one. So certainly we now have a lot of empty space over here. Maybe we have to zoom in a bit or change the camera perspective a bit. But I think in terms of readability, this is now much better to read. Overall, your shading skills and materials and textures and stuff, and also I like all the clothing of the characters and everything, really good. Just next time you work on your image, think about that your image is easy to read. So the next image was created by Samuel Bate or Samuel Bate or something like that. Sorry for mispronouncing your name if I do so. All in all, I quite like this image. I like the robot design, it's quite interesting. Also the face with all the colors and everything. The composition is quite nice. The effects are quite nice. So there's just like one main problem I have with the image, and this is the posing of the character, because it looks super stiff right now. Although this is a robot and not like a human, it doesn't mean that we have to use very stiff poses. So for example, this arm here is just straight, and in real life you nearly all the time have flexed your arms just a bit. So I would change this, for example. And our camera perspective is relatively low, and this robot thing looks like an, I don't know, I won't say evil guy, but like a warrior with much power, something like this. And we have this lower angle of the camera, so I would probably make this guy looking down a bit, like he's looking down on us since he has more power. And to make a pose look more natural, I probably would move the whole neck and the head a bit more to the front. And this would result in something like this. You can see I flexed the arm here a bit. We also can see the other arm on the other side, which adds a little bit more depth to the image. And I changed the position and also the rotation of the head so that the neck is a bit more to the front, and this guy is now looking down a bit. So I think in this way this guy looks more powerful, and it's also more enjoyable to look at this, because I think people like to look at really natural poses, because this reminds us on the real world in one way or another. So yeah, this is just the little improvement I would do for this image. So, and the last image here was created by Stein van de Ven, if I pronounce your name right. And overall, I really like this image. The mood in this image is great. And also in terms of modeling and shading, it looks really good to me. Maybe the water could have used some work, but somehow it also fits to the scene. But the main problem I have here is again readability of the robot. The first thing I thought when I was watching at this image is that this here is an arm. So that basically this area is the elbow, this is the lower arm, and this is maybe the upper arm, and this is a cable which is like connecting the two arms. And here we maybe have a hand or something like this. Because I was missing like real life reference or something that I could recognize. Then after looking at the image a little longer, I recognize this shape here, which looks like an arm or a leg. And then I also recognize another one lying over here. And then I thought, okay, then this might be a robot which maybe looks something like a crocodile, because then this long head would make sense, and then these here are the eyes. but it really took a while to understand what I'm looking at here. So what I would recommend, let's move this guy over to the side a bit, because then we have a little bit more place to play around with. Then, to understand the shape of the whole robot better, I added like a second leg over here, which make it more clear. And I added this tail over here. And then, like if this was what you aimed for, we can clearly see what kind of robot this is. I also added this mouse over here with maybe a bunch of teeth. And then it's really easy to understand that this is like a crocodile. And then in this environment, this would totally make sense. Then the only other thing I would think about, up here we have a lot of space. And I think the life is missing a bit in this scene. So I would probably add a bunch of particles or insects flying around, especially with the lighting up here. And maybe add some little birds sitting here and watching on this weird glowing robot thing. Yeah, and I think with these little things you can read the shape of the robot much better and in general understand what you're looking at. Yeah guys, I hope you enjoyed this art critique video and maybe learned a thing or two. If so, make sure to like this video if you like and subscribe to this channel and ring the bell if you love my content. And leave me a comment in the comment section below and tell me what was the #1 thing you've learned from this video. Guys, if you want to have the chance that I smash your images in the next art critique video, make sure to join one of our next CG Boost challenges. All the important info you find under cgboost.com/challenge. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.